when they come running into the room, they had the happiest faces on. They were all excited. And what happened is they were dressed in my dress shirts and somehow figured out how to tie ties on them, sort of thing. And they're carrying these little baggies like briefcases, sort of thing. And they come running into the room and they're like, "Hey, look at us. We're going to be just like dad. We're going to go to work. We're going to do our thing just like dad." Well, dad wasn't working at the time. And dad was in the middle of World War III with his wife, sort of thing. And my wife paused for a moment. Again, my wife doesn't like confrontation, but in that moment, she said to me, "Greg, look, can't you see? Can't you see that your kids want to be just like you?"
Guys, welcome back to another episode of ASCC Overflowing Buckets, where people give freely from their overflowing buckets to fill the others up. So, if you're ready to unlock your true potential, you're going to love today's episode. Seriously, one of my favorite topics. We're joined today by Greg Schweitzer, founder of Catalyst Transformation Institute. Greg is a master coach and an expert in NLP and hypnosis. How cool is that? Greg's
Very cool.
mission is to help you live your best life and do your best work by tapping into the power that's already within us. So, everyone, Greg Schweitzer. So, Greg, here's some topics that we were thinking we're going to tackle today. Ready?
Okay. Yep.
Breaking limiting patterns,
Ooh,
simplifying our daily life, mindset shifts for growth, and letting go of limiting beliefs, and self-awareness to confidence and hypnosis.
love it. Good stuff. Bettina, thanks so much for the intro. And I think what was really cool is when you talked about the purpose and the understanding around your podcast being this unleashing potential stuff. I think that's really what a lot of us are after, is that we sense inside of ourselves like there's more to me. Not that I'm bad or lacking or anything like that, but I feel like there's more I can give, there's more I can be, there's more I can do. And it's sitting in here, but how do I access that stuff? How do I access that genius inside of me and get that to come out and to flow and to blossom and to flourish, kind of thing? And so I love that we're going to get to talk about this stuff. I geek out about it. That's super fascinating. All those fun little credentials and certifications that I've done is simply because I'm absolutely just fascinated by the human person, what makes us tick, what makes us break, that kind of thing, and how to be able to use that to live well and to do well. So
I love that, the what makes us tick, what makes us break. So we know what we're going towards and what to go away from, right?
absolutely.
I love hearing the stories, what get people to where they're at. And
Mm,
because it's quite the journey, usually. It's like something happened that they
yeah.
overcame, and now they're really wanting to share with others so others can learn from their lessons, gain that wisdom.
Yeah, great question. This is interesting to me on two fronts. One, it's because it's my story. Two, because there's a lot of commonalities in us as human beings. And I think when I share what I'm going to share with you, people are going to see that in themselves. We live in a world in a time where it seems common for people to talk about, for lack of a better word, the rags to riches, the suck to success kinds of stories, sort of thing, as if there was one defining moment. And for some people, there are big moments. Don't get me wrong, but as if
Right.
there was one defining moment that totally switched them from who they were to who they are now, or what they had to what they have now. And there can be some defining moments. But I would tell you, mine has been a series of experiences over time. The good, the bad, the ugly, and all in between, right, kind of thing, that have kind of led me to where I am right now. And it led me into a place where I started searching and looking for information, looking for answers about things in my life because they either weren't going well or because I had caught sight of something really exciting that I wanted to move toward, right? We talk about moving away from the ugly, right? The pain, that kind of thing, and moving towards something exciting, a great, compelling future. So, um, I actually I had a really great upbringing. I had great parents, very loving family. I kind of have a lot of support, but I also experienced some things that were just naturally part of life that were challenging. And I also went through a couple of periods in my life, even up to recently, where I just dealt with some really ugly health kinds of things, right? And
Oh,
then there's bankruptcy things, and then there's like foreclosure things, and then there's relationship things, and good and bad on both sides. Okay, so without going into all of the details, I would say a lot of this. Uh, that I'm sharing with you could be culminated into one story. It was a defining moment for me, but it wasn't the only moment. It was just one that was somewhat pivotal, and it was a time where uh, economy had changed, career was shifting, crashing and burning in the business a little bit, right? Trying to make things work. Just had my fourth kid, right? So we got a family, got things to take care of, sort of thing, and bankruptcy, foreclosure. We just had to do what we had to do. And um, we ended up getting a call from some people that we knew that said, "Hey, look, we own this building. They were a church, right? And they own this building. We're like, hey, we know that you guys have just lost your house. You're trying to figure it out. If you'd like to, you can move into this office building we have." And so we literally moved into an office building and converted it to function as a home as much as we could. So bedrooms were offices, right? Our dishes were out on bookshelves and office supply equipment, that kind of stuff. And we just did what we could with that for a period of time. But because of how hard those things were, and I wasn't equipped at the time because I hadn't gone through that sort of stuff before, I wasn't equipped to handle it as well as I'd like to have. My wife and I used to argue a lot,
Mm,
unfortunately. And my poor kids had to deal with that kind of stuff. But there was one day where things kind of came to a head and we were struggling around a lot of things. And my wife and I are arguing about stuff. And I don't even remember what we were arguing about, to be honest with you. But it wasn't a pretty one.
mhm.
It was kind of ugly, if you will, meaning there's a lot of attitude back and forth, if you will. And
Maybe a little
at one,
pride.
yeah, exactly, right, on both parts, right. And so we were
Yeah.
dealing with, and my wife hates conflict and arguments and that kind of stuff. And although I didn't love it, I was mad about life. Okay, so we're in the middle of this thing, right? It's like World War III in my bedroom, sort of thing. And my two youngest kids come running into the room. They were 4 and 5 at the time, a boy and a girl. And when they come running into the room, they had the happiest faces on. They were all excited. And what happened is they were dressed in my dress shirts and somehow figured out how to tie ties on them, sort of thing. And they're carrying these little baggies like briefcases, sort of thing. And they come running into the room. And they're like, "Hey, look at us! We're going to be just like Dad. We're going to go to work. We're going to do our thing just like Dad." Well, Dad wasn't working at the time. And Dad was in the middle of World War III with his wife, sort of thing. And my wife paused for a moment. And again, my wife doesn't like confrontation, but in that moment, she said to me, "Greg, look, can't you see? Can't you see that your kids want to be just like you?"
Oh,
And I really was silenced at the moment. And I turned around and I left the room. And I walked down these little steps and out into the backyard, which really wasn't a yard. It was like a grotto of this big building area, sort of thing. And as soon as I got to the bottom of the steps, I heard this voice inside of me louder than anything in the world saying, "Greg, if your kids want to be like you, are you even somebody worth being like?"
mm,
And that was kind of a pivotal moment for me, in that all the stuff that had built up to then, I had learned a lot about life and people and stuff myself, but that moment made it more real than anything.
yeah.
And I just kind of made a choice at that point in time that I was going to do whatever I could to continue to learn, to be better, to do better, to learn how we tick and how we function and what works well and that kind of thing, and do my best to utilize that and be the best that I could with that piece. And so I think that that story can resonate with a lot of people because we
Absolutely.
all want to do great. Nobody wakes up in the morning going, "Gee, how can I suck today?" Right? Or, "Hey, I want to be, I want to be off pace today," or, "I want to fail today," or any of those kinds of things. It's just that sometimes we don't know what to do or how to do it. And so
Yeah.
that's why I've committed my life to being able to understand those things, so that if somebody ever were to come to me or cross paths with me, they would walk away with something that can really help improve their life in some way, shape, or form. So that gives you
Oh
kind of
my
an idea.
gosh. So what, like, let's think about this. What specific like habits or patterns do you think would really help most people they would think of it this way? What habit or patterns, if they started implementing or start working towards, would be so incredibly impactful for them to reach that change, that next level, that next place for them?
Yeah. I think I'll encapsulate this into into three words. Number one is awareness. Like, just being aware that human beings have patterns. We have habits of being. We can't help it, right?
Mhm.
We are influenced by our environments and the like, but we can't help but become patterned individuals. It's how we create consistency and certainty in our life, is to know that, hey, when I get up tomorrow, I'll be able to roll out of bed, right? And I'll be able to put on my shoes and those kinds of things that we become accustomed to, right? And so being aware that we are patterned people and that we have patterns means that we can catch ourselves in the midst of a pattern. And if it's a good one for us, we can rinse and repeat and strengthen that thing. And if it's something that's not great for us, we can interrupt that pattern. This is how every change happens, is that we interrupt our current patterns and place something in there, or many somethings in there, that change the trajectory of where we're going or what we're doing. So
We
that's the
become
first piece.
aware, we
Aware.
interrupt that pattern, and
That's right.
which makes a space, and you put something else in that space.
That's it. That's it. As a matter of fact, when you look at the world of neurolinguistics and hypnosis, what we're literally doing is replacing old behaviors, old beliefs, old patterns with new ones. It's just that there's this interesting concept that um, there's a critical part of the critical element of our brain that is there to protect us. It's a very beautiful thing that's there to protect us and keep us safe, that kind of thing. But it can also help us protect ourselves from those things that are good and useful and helpful, right? Depending on how we see those things. And so we have to be able to get past that critical factor in our brain in order to get new habits and things into the subconscious part of
I
us.
like you
That's
said,
the part of
it
us that
depends on how we see those things, right?
absolutely.
So sometimes I think people become aware, but they don't see. How do we take off the blinders so that when we see what we see, we actually see the impact of what we
Okay,
saw have on our life?
exactly. So
Did
this
that
is
question
actually,
come in correctly?
yeah, absolutely it did. And
Okay.
let me share with you that you're actually even a little ahead of the game here in that this brings us to the second word I want to share with you. So the first one was awareness, right? The
Yeah.
second word starts with A as well, and it's called affection. Our awareness or our attention is the first one.
Okay.
And the second one is our affection. Our affection is what we get used to, what we like, what we enjoy, what we keep doing because it does something for us. It meets a need or a desire in some way, shape, or form. So, for example, having attention or awareness around the fact that, well, I know that eating 6 chocolate donuts all at once is probably not real good for my body.
Right.
But my affection might be, but it tastes so good. And it makes me, get over my frustration in the moment or whatever it might be, right? And it makes my experience happier because I'm around my friends and it's just easy to eat 6 donuts all at once. Does that make sense? And so
Yeah.
there's an affection to this, right? We've got the awareness slash attention piece. And then we've got the affection, which is what have we gotten used to? What have we fallen in love with? What has become our patterns and our habits? Okay.
Mm.
And so what's interesting is that we can have an awareness and we're aware that we're in the midst of a pattern. The challenge is, how do I change my affection? How do I change my attachment to the thing? How do I see it differently, like you were saying?
Right.
Okay. And so I can look at 6 chocolate donuts and go, dang, that's horrible stuff. And I would never do that to myself. I'll eat one, but I ain't going to eat six. Right. That kind of thing. Or I may look at it going, 6 chocolate donuts is my jam. And it saves me from a lot of pain and struggle emotionally. Even if it does damage to the body, there's something maybe emotionally or psychologically that we do this with. And by the way, I'm sharing with this around 6 chocolate donuts, but this is true in your business. If somebody's in, say, real estate, they're lead generating, or if somebody's leading a team of people in their corporation or something like that, all of
Mhm.
these things are absolutely true at the core of the human person. This is why I study this so much, is because what's true of us as human beings translates into our fitness and our health and our relationships and our business success and our financials and all of those things in our life. They translate over. And so when you can get a hold of this and really start to understand it and then get good at utilizing it, the effect that you can have
Wow.
on your life is pervasive. It will affect all of these different areas. And so who are thinking about the tidal wave of change and goodness that they can imagine for their lives, this is how it happens. Whether they're consciously aware of it or not, this is how it happens. If they get there and they're like, well, I don't know really what I did, but I got there. This is what they did. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now
Oh,
we get to learn how
I
to do
miss
this on
talking to you. Why
purpose.
haven't we visited in so long?
I
This
know,
is
right?
so good. I missed you. This is fantastic.
We're at the process where we talk about attention, right?
Yeah.
Attention slash awareness. Okay. Okay. What has our attention? What captures our attention? What are we aware of? Those kind of things. And what are we not aware of at those,
Hmm.
right? As we become more aware of things that are happening, only then can we do something about it. So that's where we get the affection piece, is like, okay, so how I'm attached to this am I? What is the meaning around this thing that is happening to me or because of me?
Right.
And then the last piece, the last A word is action. What are you doing about it? I've become aware. I have attention on this particular thing. I've analyzed my affection, how attached I am to it. What does it mean to me? That kind of thing. And what am I going to do about it? Which is the action piece, right? What am I going to do about it? And how do I take actions in a way? And sometimes those actions might be thought actions. Some of them may be external behavioral actions. Is this making sense?
Yes. And so that happens a lot. We're aware. We see this. We're aware that drinking a bottle of wine every night. I'll just bring this because I was having this conversation. A bottle of wine every night is not good, but we have an affection towards it.
That's right.
But whatever reason, there's an action that's not being taken, even though we're aware and we're aware of the affection that we have towards it. That gap, and this isn't everything, like you mentioned, lead gen. We know that we need to have X number of conversations. We did a business plan, we did everything. We know here's a list of calls we need to make. We know exactly what needs to happen. We're very
Mm,
aware of what needs to
hmm
happen, but
hmm
there's that we have an affection towards not dealing with that, not making the calls, not dealing with, and it's keeping us from taking that action.
That's it. That's it. Every single time. Every single time. Most of the time, people know what they're supposed to do, or they know what to do to get to where they want to go. And if they don't, it's a little bit of education. We have more information flying at us at this time in history than any other time. So it's not that we don't know stuff, right?
Right.
And wherever somebody is, they got where they are by being able to be good at doing something and knowing something. So oftentimes we know. What happens is when we go, okay, that's what I want, and I know I need to do it, and we go to start doing it. That's when we start to bump up against our comfort zones.
Yes.
It starts to rattle our affection for this right thing, and we have to be able to replace that affection with a different kind, because if we don't replace that affection, we don't replace the meaning and the interpretation and the self-talk of how we repeat this stuff to ourselves. We don't change that, the behavior of the action will never change.
Right.
As long as I believe that drinking a bottle of wine every single night is going to make my life great or help me or something like that, as long as I continue to believe that it's only good and there is no bad, I'll
Mhm.
never change my action.
So how do we change the level of tolerance of bad that we're willing to accept? Because I find that that's like
Good question.
a lot of folks, we know it's not good, we know it's not beneficial, and there's some folks that the level their bottom the level of bad that it has to get, it's
Yeah,
their tolerance for bad is really, 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 I don't know if high or low or whatever. I don't know where to put that, but you understand what I'm saying.
I
While
do.
others, their tolerance, they're like, that's not who I am. That it's not their identity. They feel
Mhm.
like they're worth more than that. That's not who they relate to. How do we get from that to that, like to where we take
Yeah.
the actions?
Yeah. Gosh, this is so good. So let's go back to the awareness attention
Okay.
piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that are important about awareness and attention is that we have to be willing to be honest. We have to
Oh,
be willing to be honest what we believe, and we have to be willing to be honest about whether or not that thing is useful and valuable to our lives.
useful. If that thing is
If I were to,
useful and valuable to our lives.
yes. So every one of us has different values and different standards and different ways we want our lives to be. If we were to imagine your ideal life, right, your perfect way of flourishing in life, your recipe for that's going to look different than mine, which is going to look different to anybody who's listening and watching this particular podcast. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's beautiful. But when we start taking a look at those, we got to start taking a look at, okay, so if I wanted this particular thing, is it something that's really serving me on all levels? If we look at this, I'm going to go a little bit deeper here, but there's really the four dimensions of life, right? Which is our
Mhm.
physical life, our intellectual or mental life, our emotional life, and our spiritual life. If we were to take a look at something that we wanted for our life or something in our life, and we got to look at all four of those quadrants and say, is it still serving me well to make me as healthy as I can be in all four of these categories? That is awesome. But if it's something that's throwing me off in any one of these categories, I know that if one category gets thrown off, they all get thrown off. So if it's not helping me or valuable in any one of those categories, it has now become too small for my life. And if you can
Oh,
take on that understanding and that belief that anything, this is a quote of one of my favorite authors, that anyone or anything that does not help you to become your best self is too small for you.
oh, I
Who
love
doesn't want a big life? Who doesn't want their version, right? Their
I
version of a
love
great
that
and big life.
explanation.
Isn't
Yeah,
that good? Yeah,
that
that's
is
so
so good.
helpful. And I don't say that's good because Greg said it to you. I said it's good because it's something I have discovered and learned from many other people. And I can't help but just want to share it with you and with everybody else to kind of say, hey, there's a way things work, friends. There's a way that things work. And if you can get a hold of an understanding of how those work and then be able to adapt a skill set for being able to utilize and navigate the way things work, instead of constantly feeling you have to push up against things and force it. And I mean, we've got a culture that tells us work harder, be better, have this huge life, do everything this year, but do it this way. And it's like push, 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 push. And it's like, hold on. Does this even match my own personal values and what represents a great life for me? And if
Man,
it
this
isn't, then maybe I
this
need
is
to
so good.
reevaluate.
I
Go ahead,
love how you made that so simple.
if you will. Okay.
So if that activity brings down, if you take that activity and you are going to measure it to each one of those physical, emotional, I mean mental, emotional, or spiritual, and you measure that,
That's right.
and it like it's good on 3, but it like whew, drops on 4. That's not your that is too small
That's right. Okay, okay, let me
for
take this one
you.
step further. I want to help us understand why. Why is it too small for me? How? How does that work? So let's go back to the 6 chocolate donuts or the bottle of wine. Okay. 6 chocolate donuts. Okay. So if I look at 6 chocolate donuts all at once, that initially is my physical life, right? I'm affecting my physical life. So I've just ingested something. It goes into my body. We know this. Science has proven this a million times over. Blood sugars spike. When blood sugars spike, it starts changing our biochemistry. And when our biochemistry changes, we could have a sugar crash, which is now affecting our mental and emotional life. Because now I either get really ticked off or I get hangry because I'm, that kind of thing. And so now my emotional life is weird, which makes me think different thoughts. And those different thoughts are like, why does things suck so bad? Right? Kind of a thing. And so my mental life and my repetition of my self talk is going like crazy. And then all of a sudden, I'm not behaving in a way that is the highest version of myself, which is more of a spiritual piece.
Mm,
And so, because each of these pieces are pervasive, meaning our physical, intellectual, mental, emotional life are all intertwined and they're symbiotic. When one is affected, the others are affected. Then, what's good news about this is that if we are making better choices because we've learned how to interrupt our own patterns, when we're making better choices in any one of these categories, it starts to elevate all the other categories. Being better, feeling good, doing well doesn't have to be as complicated as we sometimes make it.
yeah.
This is one of the challenges nowadays because there's so many people discovering so many amazing things about the human person, and they're pocketed pieces of information. One person's really in depth on. I'm reading a book right now called Good Energy by Dr. Casey Means. It's all about your metabolism and your how your physical body creates energy and affects the rest of your life. But they go down these rabbit holes of this stuff that's powerful, and they do it in all 4 of these different dimensions of life. And there's so much data and information. But what's really helpful is to be able to, and this is what I like to do, is gather that information and bring it into a way that I can explain it to somebody like you that goes, "Oh, that's what I need to do. I can do that." Because when it's lots of stuff and it's lots of what appears to be complicated, which we're really good at complicating things, then we don't act, we don't move, we don't do that third part
Right.
because our affection is telling us that's too painful, that's too complicated, that's too much, that's not what I want to. No, I'm not doing all of that.
There's no
I'll,
clarity. You don't
I'll,
have the clarity. Yeah.
and what's interesting is we as human beings, we would rather stay in the pain that we're used to than move towards pain that is new.
Yeah.
And by the way, that new pain, go ahead.
Yeah, we were talking. No, I was talking about like when somebody's abused, right? And they're in a
Hmm.
cell, and they're abused in a cell, and then somebody opens the door, and it's bright light out there. They're terrified to go out towards a bright light, even if tell them there's freedom out there. You won't get hit. You won't get abused. The abuse will stop, but
Yeah,
they'll stay in the comfort of that
sure.
cell of the abuse, of the horrors of the cell, because it's
And
what
this is
they know. It's a comfort.
That's it. And this is that affection piece is that it's what I know. And I've been able to box myself in here, even though my life is really small right now, because trauma and abuse really screws people up. And it's just a horrible, horrible thing that a lot of us are dealing with nowadays for various different reasons. Some of them we've caused, and most of them we haven't. But it makes our world very, very small. But we've also done that on our own to protect ourselves. It's a security and defense mechanism, sort of thing like I want to be protected. And so the possibility of some light at the end of the tunnel is like, do I trust that? And do I move out from this thing that I've created right here, even though it is really small? At least know it, and at least feel like it's predictable.
It's predictable. So you brought up the trauma, and it's interesting because that's a big conversation right now. And I know
Huge.
when you visit with people, you see how their baggage, and
Mhm.
it's been said so many times, your trauma, your baggage, your whatever, how, and let's just for the sake of the conversation call it baggage that we
Yep.
carry with us, and sometimes that baggage is too heavy to take and to
Yes.
carry forward with us, but we're not willing to unpack the heavy load, right? Like
Yes.
so we're
Yes.
standing there at security at the gate at the airport, and they're like, "Oh, you're 2 pounds too heavy," and you're like, "But I'm not willing to unpack anything and rearrange or repack or redo
Right? I need
anything.
my hair dryer. I need my coat. That kind of thing. And we gain an attachment. So this takes us all the way back to the awareness piece, right? Which is becoming aware of even your own baggage. Now, let me say this about baggage because that word and that concept can be very off-putting to people because nobody likes to admit that I'm weak or I have baggage or I have issues or anything like that stuff. And the fact of the matter is, you guys, sometimes life is just hard at times. That's part of the dynamism of life. Dynamism meaning like there's give and take, there's push and pull kind of thing. We have hard things, but we also appreciate the great things when we come out of those. So there's this flow and dynamism to life that's natural and healthy, quite honestly, right? So this is so powerful and this is another way to be able to utilize and understand this stuff is to listen to how people speak. And the words that they use very literally can mean what they're thinking or feeling. And what you said is that we take the baggage to the airport and we pay for the extra weight
Mm,
in
okay.
our lives. The extra weight that we're carrying around, whatever form of baggage it is, mental, emotional, physical, that kind of thing, we're paying for that. And sometimes we're paying dearly for hanging on to some of that baggage. It's costing us a lot. And
Mm.
so by being able to understand how to stay aware and keep your attention, be able to understand and translate your affections and take certain types of actions can help us to shed those extra pounds that are just dragging us down.
I love that. That's so true. The best trip I ever took was in September. I went with Ava. We went with backpacks. We did a 3 week
Yeah,
we did a 3 week backpacking trip through Thailand, and we literally just took a big, like just a school-sized backpack.
that's
Not
awesome.
not one of those backpacker backpacks, and it was freeing because you just walk on the plane, you walk off the
Yep,
plane, you walk from
yep,
the train. There's a lot of freedom in that. So we get this. Letting go is for the purpose of receiving. We're making space that when
that's it.
the universe wants to fill space. So when we make space, it gives the universe an opportunity to fill it. I get that. Like that affection piece. I feel like that is the challenge that we have. Like maybe we can take action on a short term, but we want to go back to that comfort
Okay,
of that affection. How do we
okay,
break that? Because your NLP hypnosis, you know how to like take that chain, that elephant chain around the ankle. I'm just picturing this elephant has a chain around his
yes,
ankle. It was been there his whole life. He could break free from it, right? But he's just in his mind, and that is it. How do you help us break free from that chain?
yes, yes. So with the elephant analogy, the reason that the elephant doesn't break through, even though it's physically capable, easily could do that sort of thing, is because up to this point, since it was young, it's been conditioned to believe that it can't. Because when it was younger, it didn't have the strength to do so. And so it's just formulated this belief that I can't do this, therefore I'm not even going to try. And you
Oh,
see, people
that's
won't,
heartbreaking. But
it
sorry,
is
Phil.
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
No, no, no. And the thing is that people won't even allow themselves to desire what they don't believe can transpire. We stop desiring or believing things that are possible, and this is that affection piece where our affection is, or my belief, right, is that I'm attached to the idea that I can't break free from this chain, even though physiologically I have the power to do so. And what's fascinating is people can break this pattern or change things in one of two ways. They either got to change their belief or take an action long enough that it changes the belief.
Mm.
So
So
think about this.
if you're struggling
If you can,
changing belief, then just keep taking the action until that belief is
if you
shifted.
can, if you can, and I want to tell you that this is the harder way to do things. So
Okay.
let me give you an example. In order for me to take any sort of action, I've got to will it. So we all have willpower, right? We all have
Oh,
the
it's a
will,
finite
we call
force.
agency. So willpower fatigue like a muscle. If you
Yeah.
drop on the floor right now and do some sit-ups, eventually your body's going to go. It just physically is not capable of doing any more. All right, our willpower is the same thing. And so if we're forcing ourselves, this is why I hate the phrase "fake it till you make it." Because you're
Mm,
forcing yourself to take an action and you're willing yourself and it's going against something that I don't like it, but I'm trying to make myself do it sort of thing, you'll wear
mm,
out eventually a lot of the time. There's some things we can do that with and it works, but other things, especially how deeply conditioned or ingrained they are in, it's harder for us to do that with this because our willpower fatigues. What people don't recognize, there's a lot of talk around discipline, right? And discipline has value, but discipline is based on your willpower and that eventually wears out. So what's the key? What do we do? How do we make that different? You utilize your discipline and willpower long enough to generate a new habit. Habit is the key to permanent change.
And
Habit is the key to permanent change.
okay, because the habit doesn't take a willpower, it's just what you do.
Right. You may have to do something with your will from time to time, meaning I can get up once a day and do 10 push ups. Does that make sense? Instead of just keep going for forever, but I can do 10, then I could do 10 tomorrow, I can do 10 tomorrow. Well, then what happens is like, oh, then it becomes easy to do 15. You see where I'm
Mhm.
doing this? So
Yeah.
we can grow into these pieces by disciplining or willpowering ourselves in spurts, right? To where that, I'm used to that now. Right? Fitness is this way. It's like go to the gym for the first time, like, oh my gosh, right? This is driving me crazy. I don't feel like I can do anything. I can't lift anything. I can't, right, whatever. I can't last in the spin class or something like that. But then you go again and you go again, and maybe at first that's all you can do for the first 3 weeks, and then after that it's like, oh wait, I did a little bit more. Oh, that's kind of cool, and we get excited about that. And when you can attach yourself to progress over perfection, you
Yes.
start moving in that direction. So here's what's interesting is that the way that our brain works is that every time you take an action, every time you do something or think something differently, you're actually physically creating new neurons, new nerve cells
Okay.
in your brain and your body. Because we now know that our nerve system goes and nerve cells are all throughout the body, not
All
just in the brain,
intertwined.
right? Okay. So what's interesting about that is that if I were to do a particular habit and I've just created a nerve fiber, if you will, a nerve cell, and then
Mhm.
I do it again, and I create another nerve cell, and I do it again, and I create another one. I can't cross all those fingers, right? They start getting intertwined. That bundle of nerves starts to become really thick and really strong. And just like a rope, a thick rope will hold you from hanging off a cliff. A thread, you might be in trouble.
Right.
That making sense? And
Yes.
so each time you do something, even in smaller amounts, you start layering on new neurological bands, if you will, that start to become that habit. It becomes unbreakable. You don't stop old habits, you replace them with new ones. Because when you're busy building the new one, you're starving the old one.
Oh, okay.
You see where I'm going with that?
How long do
Your
you have to
energy,
I if is it possible to starve it till it dies?
yeah, there's a possibility to be able to starve something. In most cases, starve something to the place where it just doesn't get in the way anymore because the new one's so strong, and it just becomes a new way of being. Okay,
Okay.
and that's the key word there is it becomes a new way of being. It becomes how you are. It becomes who you are. And when something is who and how you are, you don't have to think about it anymore. Think about the first time you ever drove a car. You get into the car for the first time and you're taking driver's ed, and it's like, I barely know the difference between the gas and the brake. And then when I get started, it's like,
Yes.
right, that kind of thing. And the poor driver's ed people are probably constantly in high stress sort of thing. And it just stinks. But nowadays, you and I'll get in a car and we're going to go pick up our kid from school sort of thing. And how many times have we driven a car and all of a sudden we stop and we go, oh my gosh, did I stop at that stoplight? I don't even know if I stopped because we are
Where am
so
or you look
habituated.
up and you're like, "Where am I?"
Yeah, we've
Or how
driven enough times now. We've driven enough times now that it just becomes how we are. And we don't have
Mhm.
to think about it anymore. And that's a beautiful place to be because that lets us into that state of flow, which is, by the way, a restful thing for our nervous system. And it just lets us be great because we've conditioned that in ourselves.
That's the state of flow. So you said that's the easiest way or the most efficient way to do the shift. You said changing the belief.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we
So,
how do we go about that? I'm sure you know a systematic way and
sure.
can keep it simple for us to
Great.
optimize that
So,
belief.
we'll talk about two things. One, I've already alluded to, which is because the willpower thing fatigues, give yourself shorter bursts of practice, practicing the new way. Not to the place where you totally exhaust yourself or you fight yourself. It's like, hey, if I've never made 20 lead generation calls in one day, I'm going to start with three.
Yeah.
I can do three. And then, right, that was okay. I did it. And the next day I'm going to do three, and the next day I'm going to do three. So I think so you can grow into it if you do smaller amounts, right?
Yes.
I remember the first time when I was a young kid, where at the swimming pool, I wanted to jump off the high dive for the very first time, and I was like, I thought about it for weeks. In my mind, and this is where I'm alluding to the next way to do this. In my mind, I was getting up there on the high dive, thinking about jumping off, kind of thing. Well, how cool could it be, or how scary could it be, kind of thing. And then eventually, I got up on the high dive because I was like, okay, just gonna get up there and we're gonna do what I can with this. And get up there. I'm standing over the edge, and I'm like, whoa, the view is wholly different from up here, and this looks like it's 40 stories, not just 10 feet to the water, kind of thing. And so I had a whole different thing there. So what I'm saying is that you can inch your way into something like that, which is helpful. But also, what we do inside of our mind is that our brain doesn't understand the difference between a real experience and a vividly imagined experience.
I love that.
So imagine a nightmare that you've had, and you wake up, you're like, "Oh, that was so real, and that dog was so big, and it was drooling all over me. I swear, I felt it drooling on me." Right? It was chasing me, and so it just felt realer than just as anything you've had in your life. Okay,
Mhm.
but all you were doing is laying in your bed, and you probably weren't even moving. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? So you weren't actually in the experience, but your brain didn't know the difference. And so, what's beautiful about that is that we can actually mentally rehearse and practice being certain ways. We can mentally rehearse and practice interrupting that pattern and placing something new in that spot. And when we do that, it brings us a different result. And if you do that over and over and over enough in your head, it just becomes the way that you are.
You
And then
can
you will
men
actually
I
do it.
love I haven't like, I knew about this, I knew it, but mentally practicing on purpose, and I think we do that, but we don't do it with intention. Mentally practicing mentally practicing breaking those behaviors.
Yeah, some people have gotten to places of success, whatever that means, right? Places
Yes.
of success, and they're like, I don't even know how I did that sort of thing. And it's because they got there accidentally. And what I'm teaching, what I'm hopefully everybody's grasping from this is that you can do this on purpose. Now, let's back up a little bit. Let's go back to the attention, affection, action,
Okay.
right? Okay. So I'm trying to recap all this because we've come a little ways. We talked about what it's like to be aware, start paying attention that you have habits of being, ways that you get things done, and then notice those, notice the results they're getting, and go, okay, in the midst of my process for doing this, what's the pattern and where's something that I need to change or differentiate? Okay. Then we have to analyze our affection, like how am I attached to this way of being and
Mhm.
what and the meaning that I'm giving this stuff. Because you and I, we could go driving around our car and we could get a flat tire. And you might get out and go, oh, well, you know what? It was probably time for me to get new tires anyway. And so this is perfect timing. And I might get out
Yeah.
and go, son of a God, why does things have to happen to me? I like, do you see where I'm going? That's completely two different
The meaning, the
interpretations.
emotion that you put around it, yeah.
Yeah, that. And that's what affection means. The word affection actually means emotion. So what is the emotional attachment we have to the good and the bad and the ugly in our life? Because how we feel about it, and especially if we continue to have strong emotion around it, it stays longer. And that brings me to this piece I wanted to help you guys out with when it comes to the mental rehearsal piece.
Okay.
Okay. With the mental rehearsal piece, number one is you got to be speaking to yourself because that's what you're doing when you're thinking, right? It's self talk, if you will. It's thinking. Okay. First person. You got to be speaking to yourself, and you got to be speaking in first person. I, me, my.
Got it.
Right? Because if we don't do it first person, then we're dissociating
You're
from it. We're like,
projecting. It's
you
like you,
sometimes
yeah.
people do blank, right? Or sometimes I'll be coaching somebody and they'll be like, well, I ask them like, how are you going to do that? Well, you would probably do this. And when they say you would probably do this, they've dissociated from themselves from it. And therefore they're not mentally practicing it. They're watching it. They're watching it from a distance. Okay. But if I put myself in there, I go, oh, well, I do this. I'm now in the experience. I'm associated to that. And that's really important because it's experiential, it's embodied, if you will. So you've heard me speak throughout the time that we've been talking together, right? Well, this is what we do sometimes as human beings. I'm including myself in that process, but I'm not alone, kind of a thing. So it
Yes.
can be inclusive, right? In terms of like getting myself associated to the scenario. But you statements or they statements and that kind of stuff is usually dissociating ourselves from the situation. Well, they have these particular views or they do that in their business sort of thing, right? As if it's some way of me dissociating either because of disgust or because of disinterest or because of fear. Doesn't matter what it is, but we dissociate from that. When we dissociate from experiences, they're less intense and they have less of a likelihood of affecting us and changing us. Sometimes I'll get people to dissociate from an experience so that we can evaluate it from a distance. Because if I'm in the experience, let's those trauma and abuse pieces we were talking about.
Yeah, the
If people feel like
traumas.
they're in the experience, if they feel like they're in the experience, they may have an ab reaction and freak out and just have a terrible experience. But if you can get them to go, okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to step out of your own body and I want you to back up and I want you to be able to see yourself over there in that situation. I want you to tell me what's going on. And just by being able to distance ourselves from that, it lowers the emotional intensity.
Yeah.
Okay. A rise in emotional intensity creates a stronger attachment. So this is where I'm going with this whole piece. If you're first person, you're speaking in the present tense, and your emotional intensity that really creates the change.
And I see people do this all the time. They're like, I know it's safe. It just feels safe. Like, I know this is what I'm supposed to do. Just taking that action. So if we can imagine having accomplished what we know we're supposed to accomplish and then feel how that's going to feel, right?
Mm,
And then and maybe and just play it out. That play it all the way out to all the way to
all
the
the way
closing
out.
table, all the way to getting the referral, all just taking the minute to playing it all
That's
out.
right. So good, so good. So let's play with this for a minute. When we're
Okay.
talking about the two pieces, which is the repetition, right? And then we're talking about the emotional intensity. Let's go back to the repetition piece. Because in repetition, you can repeat things the wrong way. You can repeat things that will generate less good, if you will. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
so, what do I do in my repetition that's going to be useful for me, especially when you're playing something out of your mind? So you use the word playing it out. Let's talk about what that looks like. Okay, because there's specific ways that if you play it out in these particular ways, what it's going to do is it's kind of the greatest effect over helping to transform you and your life and your results in the way that you want them to be.
I love that. You're so impactful. So the way that you're able to do this, who are your like ideal, like, because you've always been one to serve others, right?
Okay. Thank you for asking this question. And what I want to do is I want to create a distinction here, in that there's the people that I have a heart for, that I love to serve and to help and to just, and then there's the business part of like, this is people who hire me and then what I'm looking for, my ideal avatar client kind of thing. Okay.
The ones who fund your
This,
life.
all right. The other one's fun in my life. Right. So this other piece is like, it's human beings. I mean, we all, this experience of being human is both glorious and excruciating at the same time. And to understand those dynamics, I just want to help people be able to have a greater experience of life. Period. End of story. I don't care who you are and what you do. And I've purposely spent a lot of my life gaining understanding and tools to be able to do just that.
Yeah.
Now, in business, everybody know, well, not everybody knows, but if you don't know, in business, you got to have a particular person that you're aiming for. Otherwise, you can't talk to everyone and get everyone's attention, if you will. So who do you look for? So very often, I work with a lot of people in the real estate and mortgage industry, but I've worked with a lot of people outside of that. But what I'm really looking for is a couple of things in people. Number one is that they have to have a belief that things can be different in some way, shape, or form. You probably heard the phrase that says, Mike Tyson used to say that everyone's got a plan, and then they until they get punched in the face. Like everybody goes into a boxing match with this plan, then you get punched in the face, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. This is the same kind of concept as that when somebody's like, oh, I'm totally coachable, and they get in a coaching session, and I bring up something, they're like, right? They're like,
Right.
either A, I'm not going to do that because it's not me, which we could talk about identity. When people start putting identity on something, like that's not me,
Right.
then they're never going to change it until they can switch that out.
When people say, "Hey, you got to be all in," right? What that means is when that coach identifies that one thing, right? That thorn that you've kind of allowed your body to absorb and it's in there, right? And it's in there and
Yeah,
they're like, "Hey, there's a thorn there. We might have to like cut it open and dig it out." You have to be willing to allow that process to happen.
for sure. And you know what really, really, really helps with this
What?
is to help people to let them know that, how do I say this? It's not your fault. And this is how life works. You can't help as a human being with the way that we're designed, the way that we're made, you can't help but be conditioned and transformed by your environment. There's a phrase that says your environment is always stronger than your will. If you are just alive and we're functioning in society, society's beliefs and ideals and philosophies and those kind of things, they're going to bleed onto you, right?
Yeah.
And if you have something happening to you enough times, it's eventually going to affect you because we can't consciously be on defense all of the time and try not to let anything in.
It's like release a judgment of uh not you don't have to do 100 transactions. It's okay and you're worth it. You're worth you whatever goal that you're wanting to achieve. And this is something like and it's funny because this is the
Yeah,
journey I've been on, right? Is like
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
like my this was my goal 100 transactions because that's when we first got into real estate is like okay double transactions every single year you hit this amount now you have to do. So that game was fun, right? And
yeah,
then it's like
yeah.
well now that we get to choose, do we want to do that again or
Yeah.
and if we did that what for what purpose, what is it that we want to do?
Okay. So let's look at two different things here because you'll find this fascinating. Number one, Bettina, why do you want to hit your goal? Whatever your goal is right now in your mind, why do you want to hit it?
Because, okay, my thought is that I want the opportunity to say yes. So I want to say yes in time and finances. So if an opportunity comes up to go, and it's usually has something to do with my children.
Okay.
So when I play it out in the future, one of my
Hmm.
kids has a kid, has a soccer game, has an event. I say
Hmm.
yes.
Awesome.
That's
Great.
like that is it. It's that's how I play. It's like,
Hmm.
oh yeah,
Hmm.
sounds fun. Let's go.
Hmm.
Somebody says, hey, I want to try. I want to do like one of the kids. I want to random.
Yep.
Oh, that
So
sounds
where I'm going
cool.
with this is I ask you,
Let's work
when
towards
I
that.
ask you, yeah, when I ask you why you want to hit your goal, and
Mhm.
you told me I want to be able to say yes. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to go out into the future and I want you to imagine yourself in that place where I now have that freedom to say yes whenever I want to.
Yes.
There is closure on that for you. And you're like, I have arrived. This is it. And what happens is that our motivation is based on these very things, in that our motivation and our energy to take action will dissipate or disappear when we've achieved what we want. Why am I going to put more energy and effort into building more things when it's not really what I want anyway?
Mhm.
This is so fascinating because when we create a goal, a lot of people, when they create goals, they get excited about it because they think about it in their brain. But what happens is they think about it in their brain and they associate to it, and they're seeing through their own eyes and hearing through their own ears and feeling with their own feelings, kind of a thing. The brain's going, I'm here. Why do I need to do anything?
With that, what is your hell yes right now?
If you don't mind giving you a little backstory, March of 2021, right about the time COVID was coming into the States and that kind of thing, and the whole world seemed to kind of blow apart. Um, I'd been taking a medication for a lot of years. That was anxiety kinds of stuff, this and that kind of thing, whatever was helping me. But I never really paid attention to the fact that I only needed it for a short time and I could have gone off at any time I wanted to, or try, at least try. So like 25 years. Well, the company that manufactured this stuff couldn't make it anymore because of, I don't know, shortage of supplies or something like that due to COVID. So they switched out the medication. And my intention was eventually get off once they switched it, but all hell broke loose. And like I mean, I'm still dealing with stuff like that. So I guess what I'm saying is that there was a massive amount of really crazy ugly that happened for me around all this stuff. I had days where I could only function for like an hour at a time. Sometimes I'd be in my bedroom for a week or two at a time, sort of thing. It's a really a big mess. Um, in that, I took a hard evaluation of like, Greg, what have you been doing with your life, and where are you going, and does this even matter, sort of thing. And I would tell you that in this process and journey of growing out of this, and usually having to use a lot of these skills myself, which is really interesting, is to try to utilize what you've been teaching and practicing, right? Um, and I'm doing the best I can with that. I feel like right now, one of the things that's probably the biggest hell yes for me is both my energy and my time. And so, but it's more of the energy piece because we all have the same amount of time. Nobody gets to create more or anything like that. But it's how much energy do I have to live life and to do life in those particular days and hours and minutes and that kind of thing.
That's probably the fact that you're going on this journey makes you such an amazing coach. Uh, my
Thanks.
husband would used to use the analogy, those folks. Well, I used to say my husband's a good coach because he wasn't a natural. He'd say I wasn't a natural athlete. So because I
Right.
wasn't a natural, I had to work really hard to figure it out. And because I had to work so hard to figure it out, it's easier for me to teach somebody. I love this
Yeah, you're welcome.
conversation. This is such a fun conversation for me. I
Yeah.
love this time together. Is there anything that I don't want us to like you later on saying, oh, I wish we would have covered this. Is there anything
Okay.
that you're like, you know what, Bettina, I wish you would have asked me about this or I wish we would have talked about this. Is there anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's two pieces. One of them is, as we've talked about all this stuff, and as you're listening and you're going, oh, that's really interesting, and oh yeah, that makes sense, and this is working, that kind of stuff, and we've laid it out in a nice, pretty framework of the three A's and the four dimensions, kind of a thing, right? I want people to understand is that these are good ways to be able to view things and see them, and in practice, it's going to feel a little muddier. Life can be a little messy sometimes. This is navigation. When you're out in a boat on the water and you set your destination for the next port, you're going to have a lot of waves and a lot of wind and a lot of rain. They're going to try to bump you off course. When an airplane takes off from, I'm in Boise, Idaho, and it's going to fly to Honolulu, Hawaii, it's like 600 miles from here. Okay, they set a course, but what ends up happening is because of jet stream and and this and that, they get a little off course. And so they're constantly doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that to keep on course. And what I want you to understand is that you need to be patient with yourself and patient with the process, because it's okay that a little bit of off course here and a little bit off course there. And occasionally it's a big off course and we got to do a U-turn, that kind of thing. But that's part of the process. And don't get mad at yourself or frustrated with other people because of that, because you can't change it. That's the way things are, and you're not broken and you're not doing anything wrong when things get off a little bit from time to time. But when now you're being equipped with the tools and the resources to help yourself be able to stay on track, because what happens is if we don't know how to do this,
Mhm.
a little bit of wind that takes us off track ends up happening that I left Boise, but I ended up in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, 1,400 miles from my destination, because I didn't know how to navigate and turn this thing back around.
You
And
didn't
so
know
we
how
can
to
keep
read the
ourselves.
data points, you didn't know how to fly,
Yep.
but what you do need to know is that you are the navigator. You're not a passenger in the back seat just hoping that the pilot knows how to get there, but you are the pilot, you are the captain of your ship. You do have agency. You're
Thank you. And that's actually the second point I wanted to make, was that because I wanted you to make sure that you're being patient and kind with yourself, but also recognize that you're equipped. And the reason that my company has been called Catalyst Transformation, right? And I call myself a chief catalyst is I spend my time helping people like you become a catalyst in their own right. And if you look at the world of chemistry, there are elements that exist out there. And these elements are trying to bump up against each other. And a catalyst will come in and help them interact and speed up the process of change. But what happens is a catalyst speeds up the process and initiates it. But in the process, it doesn't get burned up or used up or worn out. It doesn't get diminished in any way, shape, or form. So we as human beings can become catalysts, where we're taking all the elements of life and be able to become the catalyst to make good results happen without burning out and burning up in the process. And so that's what I feel like I excel at. But it's also why I wanted to be able to teach this stuff, is because it helps people to be able to at least have a beginnings of the understanding of how do I become a catalyst in my own right. Because I don't care. Your business doesn't run itself. Lives don't live themselves. Health doesn't happen itself. Fitness, all those things. The common denominator is you. You are the catalyst that starts and runs a business, that creates health, that operates in your families and your relationship, that kind of thing. And so when you can get yourself functioning at the highest level, everything else is going to come into play. As a matter of fact, when it comes to business, a lot of the elements that make us human beings flourish are the same things that make businesses flourish. And we can translate those two things together, and it becomes a one life scenario, as opposed to like, yeah, I'm Greg the entrepreneur, but I'm also Greg the guy, the person sort of thing. It's like, no, I'm one whole person and I'm one whole life, and
Yeah.
that is where fulfillment really comes. So
I
that's what I
love
wanted to share.
this. I love this that whole fulfilling, especially for those of us who are entrepreneurs, because our life is our business is in our life. And I see a lot of folks say, "Hey, you need to have a clear line in the sand between if this area isn't working,
Yeah,
don't let it bleed into this." And I'm just thinking, just
yeah. Except that's not how life works, and we could go on for another 20 minutes on this piece, but that's not how life works. Like, so the idea of it's like, okay, I go to work, and when I come home, I'm home, Greg, and when I'm at work, I'm a Greg. Yeah, all the stuff that happened at home, I'm still thinking about while I'm at work sometimes. If I had a fight with my wife before I left for work in the morning, that's still going to affect me that particular day,
your energy
and then vice
shifted.
versa. If
Yeah.
Right. And that's that piece that we're talking about, energy management, if you will. It's like I may have had a client that had a rough moment, or I had a great moment with a client, and I come home, and all that's part of me right there. So these things affect us in various areas, and so if we can create this homeostasis, if you will, by becoming a more powerful catalyst ourselves, then we're not going to feel as fragmented. Like, oh God, now I've got to go be realtor for a while, and then I did my realtor thing, and I'm into realtor mode, sort of thing, and now I got to come home and I gotta be a super husband, and I've got to be a mega dad, and I got we're not meant to play multiple roles. We are one person that has multiple aspects to our life, and that's a really flipped version of this. That instead of like I'm this person who plays multiple roles, it's no, I'm one person who has a multidimensional life, and that can be fulfilling if we let it.
That makes so much better sense to me. And I don't want to sound, and this is where I'm like, am I being unwilling, or like, because what you just spoke to me right there, that makes so much sense. And I think this is why I love and I appreciate and I respect every conversation like this conversation
Thank you.
so much. So I
Me too.
appreciate you. Thank you.
Me too.
If somebody needed to get a hold of you or wanted to get a hold of you, or just how would they do, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, super easy. So you can send me an email, Greg at Catalyst Transformation. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm out there. Or you can just pick up the phone and call me, and I'm glad to just give my phone number out. I'm pretty easy and approachable that way. And if somebody wants to chat more about this stuff or work on some things together, then just reach out to me.
What's your phone number?
208-794-3532.
Perfect. I love it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. This has been so fun.